Finally, inspired by Donald Horne, of all people, the late, great Donald Horne. I was flicking through The Lucky Country, famous work, 1964. I read that back in the 90s, but I was a teenager still, I think, the mid-90s. I flicked through it at the library. I left it. Thought having read it, I'd leave it with someone. I might reread it, actually. It's very old, but there's quite a few points, or a few points that could apply here. The line I think of is Australia, the final chapter, the first sentence. Australia is a lucky country run mainly by second-rate people who share its luck. And I think that's what I think about. That's a line I think about when I think about last few years, the coronavirus things. It seems that our luck has run out, as it was eventually going to do. The politics is strange. We saw lockdowns come into effect for the first time in human history. I believe people speak of the cordon sanitaire. That was enforced by the military too. That's nothing to get excited about. But these Chinese-style lockdowns that were enacted, copied from China, I think are new in human history. Very drastic and authoritarian. If you go back, the politics was completely reversed. You had lockdowns being enforced under Scott Morrison here, under Trump in the USA, and under Johnson in the UK. All right-wing governments. Pretty hardcore right-wing governments with Trump in particular. The very corrupt Johnson regime, having just beaten Corbyn in the end of 2019. And Morrison, Christian fundamentalist, QAnon type, very right-wing governments. And there was even criticism of Trump. He said he made a fairly reasonable claim to stop people getting on planes coming from Wuhan to the USA, and that was at the height. It was about March 2020 when the hysteria was at its peak when the lockdown started, and there was possibility. People believed that it had a mortality rate of 10 or 12% around there, and there was the new bubonic plague. There's complete hysteria. The media was completely hysterical. All those wild videos of people falling down, those obviously fake videos from China, falling down dead in the street, manufactured. A lot of nonsense, the fake pictures of huge arrays of caskets in Italy, which was actually came from a few years earlier. About 4 or 5 years earlier, that picture came from. A lot of manufactured consent in the Chomskyan way. But when Trump made a fairly reasonable, when there was believed to be a new bubonic plague type situation, new Ebola, it was fairly reasonable for Trump to say, no, don't have anyone from China, in particular Wuhan, getting on a plane and spreading the plague everywhere. But he was accused of xenophobia, it was terrible. All the Liberal Democrats were convinced that you should get on the plane to spread the plague wildly in the US. Very strange. But with an election that year, there was a sense among the Democrat supporters that if they hyped this, kept pushing, they could damage Trump and get Trump out. That was a political consideration. And I think that was copied unfortunately here with ALP supporters um, hyping this to damage Scott Morrison. And that's how the politics changed. Rukshan Fernando, formerly independent, I think he works at Rebel. Alvi Yemeni, he he's at Rebel too. I don't watch Rebel, despite what people, certain anarchists think. I don't read Rebel. I've seen a couple of their videos on Davos posted to Twitter. I follow Rukshan on Twitter too, but I don't imbibe a lot of that work, despite what a lot of the Antifa people think. And they were both for both Rukshan and Alvi Yemeni were for lockdowns. They supported lockdowns because they bought into it straight away. So these sort of right-wing, rebel type news guys were fully in. The right-wing everywhere was fully into lockdowns. So in the Anglosphere at least, and there was a lot of left opposition. Phil Greaves, the premier Marxist theoretician, the great man Phil Greaves, he was picked it, and the clique around him, Mad Molly Klein, Red Kahina, Cordelius, all those, Jacob Levitch, his name is, I think, and all these other Marxists were right on it, right from the start. C.J. Hopkins, who I don't think is a Marxist, but probably a generic sort of socialist, left, a general type of figure, and he caught on to it straight away. So it was the right-wing lockdowners versus the Marxist left, the actual left. Marxists sort of being the actual left, not social democrats, not the social fascists, as Stalin described them as social fascists, not the Antifa, not the Radlibs, not the whoever they describe themselves, not the Blairites, not the centrists. It was the Marxists who fought this right from the start, but that's been lost now. It's completely reversed, and these so-called progressives, the Bernie-crats and the Antifa and the anarchists and the Trotskyists and the sort of radical liberals, radlibs, they've the social fascists, the ALP types, they've gone in on COVID full bore, full authoritarianism. Dictator Dan won re-election, got the Stockholm syndrome going. Absolutely terrible. But the thing that flipped, like the magnetic poles every 140,000 years, the magnetic poles at the ends of our planet will flip. They'll just completely reverse course. A very strange phenomenon. Very dynamic magnetism, very dynamic force. It's a very strange thing. It happens roughly every 140,000 years, I think. We might be due for one. That would be weird. Good luck navigating with compass there. And so it completely flipped. It's lockdown is a left thing supposedly now, if you call them the left, the new left. But I don't think that's it doesn't ring true. There's been a lot of left resistance, I think. Some anarchists have actually flown the flag of anarchism. Corey Morningstar, I think, a few others. People who are actually anarchists, who subscribe to actually an anti-authoritarian thing, stood up pretty well. But the Antifa in Australia, I don't think we're ever going to do that because they don't really. It's virtue signalling really. Their their values are virtue signalling, and actually coming to the head-on situation where you actually have to fight the government and challenge the authoritarian state. They squib that, but I've done that before. I've been a little bit of a squib at times, and I didn't go to an anti-lockdown protest for various reasons. It would have been thing. So I sort of did that too, and I sort of bought into the COVID narrative early because I assumed you trust the science, trust the experts. That's how I've been, scientifically minded and materialist. But we got dipped, and we're still being gypped, and they're still pushing the hysteria. Um, the so-called left in Australia, it's not a real left, but and a lot of the Marxists aren't reliable either. It's not genuine, and it was never going to stand up. Our elites have been craving an opportunity. You can see it with the anti-bait people stuff, and it's a logical consequence of that. It's just been applied to the general population rather than an outsider group. And you can see the logic there, you can see the natural progression, but these Antifa people don't, because they don't have the analytical skills to work things out. I have them because I was lucky to be blessed with a high IQ, probably 125 to 130 overall, verbal IQ of 160. In some tests, I've gotten as high as 160 on the verbal. So I have the mental architecture to work it out. They don't have any analytical skills. There's no, the anarchism is not designed to give a proper analytical view of the world. And whatever you say about Marxism, its failures and its shortcomings, it does. Marxism actually does give you an analytical insight into how the world actually works. It's not true with anarchists. It's very weak source in terms of intellectual structure, and that's why they can't work it out. And just cowardice. I've been cowardly at times too, a number of times. I'm not going to be judgmental, but that's just the fact. That's the reality of the situation. It's just cowardice and a lack of materialist analysis, and maybe a desire to be on the winning team for once instead of just sort of being a fringe entity, a fringe outfit. Very tempting to jump on the bandwagon. So that's my analysis of how they failed in this situation, and it's very easy when your politics is simply virtue signaling and there's no really effort to engage the actual state. Go and wave a few placards, have a nice walk through the park on a Sunday afternoon, get your little Aboriginal flag out and talk about opening the borders for refugees and that. And there's no skin in the game, as Talib might say. You just have your nice little afternoon out in the park or walking down the street, and then that's it. There's no pretense to actually affecting any change or challenging state power. And when your politics is like that, when it comes to the crunch, you're not going to be prepared to do it. You have no proper preparation to actually take on the forces that be. So that's they've been badly exposed, but I didn't expect them to hold up anyway. These people, but we can still grind away. We can still grind away at at the elites' little acts of non-compliance and disobedience, we can still push against this thing. We're slowly winning. Slowly. I've been saying this for a long time, over 12 months, but the tide sort of turned around probably September, October. The fascism that's was supposed to be implemented is being unwound, and China is erupting. The Chinese are on the march, and good luck to them. It'll get ugly over there, but they've very bravely put themselves in the firing line, even more so than other countries. So, but that's another symbol that another sign that everything is turning, and we are slowly chipping away at this situation. Trudeau's dumped Biden. He's blaming Biden now for the lockdowns and the emergency powers, the fascism that he engaged in. He's saying he's taking orders from old Gropey Joe. So he's throwing Gropey Joe under the bus. He's blaming him. So that's another sign. That's a second sign that this little agenda is starting to fall apart. And we've got a long way to go yet, but we can win this. We can win.